everyone, I'm Jennifer, the host of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai, where we're going to talk about the Japanese concept of Ikigai, or living a life of purpose. Here you're going to hear inspirational stories from all different types of people who are finding their own life of purpose. You're going to hear about how they found their Ikigai and what they do every day to live an integrated life. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. Yes, I got my podcast name correct. I am your host, Jennifer Shinkai. Also correct, I'm on a roll today. And I'm so excited to be here with my guest, dialing in from the amazing Japanese Alps, right?
A bit north of that.
North of there. Oh gosh, well, there you go. I was on too much of a roll. I was so confident. There's my first mistake. But up in Minakami, Cory McGowan. Welcome.
Yep. Thank you. Great to see you.
Yeah, Cory and I were just talking before, like, when did we actually meet? And we found something that we had in common is that neither of us could really remember. But I do remember sitting outside in a cafe. And we were talking about coaching as you were going through a transition, which we're going to talk about in this call. About your move to the great outdoors, becoming a coach, so moving from central Tokyo. But I just have to read the first line and maybe a little bit more of your intro. Half adventurer, half transformational coach, half bear dancer, half good at maths. Cory is based in the beautiful mountains of Minakami, Japan, with his wife, Mio, and two boys, Tayo and Sky. So he is a Japanese resident before the turn of the millennium. Me too. Do you remember like Y2K? Everyone was so excited about it. So I think we've been here for about the same amount of time. And whole career in Japan, so very similar there. And more than half of your life outside the native home of America. That's where it changes, the UK. But basically, we have fairly similar paths in that part. But after working in education and development, all different levels of management, now he is into ontological coaching. And it's very exciting for him to move to the mountains from Tokyo. And he's working with leaders and teams and just really helping people to connect with nature, connect with themselves, and being like the Minakami tour guide, right? The international ambassador for Minakami to help with rural revitalisation, which we might get into as well, because one of our previous guests, Violet Bacileo, talked about that back in Kochi. Is it Kochi? I can't remember. Anyway, wherever she is, somewhere in a dying village, she is. She's bringing back life to that. So welcome, Cory. Thank you so much for coming. And for those of you who'll be watching this on YouTube, he has got this amazing, well, you can see, but for the podcast listeners, he's got amazing green background. There's a river flowing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are right now?
Sure. So we're in Minakami, as you said, which is about 160 kilometers from Tokyo. Quick shot on the Shinkansen to Jomo Kogen Station. And the river that's behind me is the Tonegawa River, which is the second longest river in Japan. And we're about 20 minutes or so from the source of it, up in the mountains. Oh, wow. So the mountains that you can't see because of the rainy, cloudy day today behind us is the Tanegawa Range, which is a range of mountains that separates Gunma Prefecture from Niigata Prefecture. So kind of a really special place to have such easy access to the city, but also to be like quite a wild place. Minakami has been part of the non-Japanese community for probably upwards of 40 years because of rivers and the mountains and snowing and, all this kind of outdoor activity that goes on here.
And as you are, half bear dancer, is your background in the country, or is this something that you've come to like as an adult?
I grew up in a pretty rural place and spending a lot of time in the outdoors, spend a lot of time doing adventures. Coming to Japan actually was probably the time that I started to spend the least amount of time doing that compared to before. And so in a lot of ways, it's kind of coming back to that and coming home to this type of environment. Yeah, where I lived as a kid was not as wild as this, but it was pretty rural.
Right. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about maybe bed dancing later on as it comes in. But I want to hear a little bit about, I'm sure to some people, like, look, like, wow, he moved from Tokyo to the countryside, or, big city X to the countryside. What was that kind of journey like for you and your family? Because for many people, when they think about their Ikigai, some is circumstantial and they really want to be in a different environment. Mm-hmm. So what was that like on either a practical level, but also on that kind of dreaming level?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. It was and actually still is kind of surprising that it happened the way that it did, or that it happened at all, really. I mean, we were in Tokyo for 15 years, really well established there. My wife is Japanese. She's originally from Chiba, but is just very much an urban focused person and has been for most of her life. So it wasn't predictable in a lot of ways.
So this is not like a U-turn for your family, right? Which many people like go back in Japan, like go back to their hometown, or yeah.
Nope, not at all. Yeah. 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 My wife and I met basically when she was living in Kitasenju, and we stayed in Kitasenju basically the whole time until we moved here. So yeah, it was a big change. But we had been coming out here because a friend of ours let us borrow their country home here. So we've been coming out for a couple of years. And it was literally like me out for a Sunday run thinking, wait a minute, I could live here. And coming home and calling my wife outside to the deck and saying I needed to have a chat with her, and being amazed that she didn't immediately scream at me and say, no, you're crazy. She kind of considered it. And some of the key considerations were that I would be able to commute to my work in Tokyo. So there was maintaining that stability. And then there was the fact that our boys were still kind of young enough that they weren't like so attached to their friend community in Tokyo that it would be hard for them to be separated. So it was kind of these combination of things that made it kind of practical. Yeah. My wife is very fiscally minded as well, thank God, because I'm not. And just the how the economics of it would work, we thought looked good also. So yeah, it was kind of not predictable, but in some ways things fell into place and in all kind of the right ways.
And what was the kind of timeline from that? Like first the run, when you went, hang on, maybe this can happen, and having that conversation to like, the keys to the door full time.
I want to say that it was like fall, like maybe late summer, early fall, that I first had that conversation. And then it was like conversations with my work and all this kind of thing. And then everything had to line up with the boys' school year. So it was that following spring. So it was probably 6 to 8 months.
That's pretty fast though.
Yeah, for me, that's pretty slow.
Okay. Everything's relative.
Yeah, like I'm not known for kind of much long-term planning. But yeah, it was like from the idea to it really happening, and again, like there was just a lot that kind of needed to fall into place in the way that it did.
Well, but maybe with the school year, right, that actually works in your favor because it gives that rhythm into it's better to do it at the beginning of the year. Yeah. So we need to be moving in March, March, so that they can get into the area and move in April. Yeah. So sometimes those external limitations can actually support us in making changes as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's many listeners who've been like thinking and dreaming for years, but maybe the thinking and dreaming versus the actual like practical conversation to make the thing happen. Yeah. And what's changed for you and your family like with this move? On like many different levels as well, coaching question, right?
Yeah. You may have to edit this, unfortunately, Jennifer, but part of living in the countryside is someone has just randomly showed up here.
Right.
And I'm the only one at the house right now. So
let's take a
I'm gonna
pause
have
and give
to,
Cory a moment to think about this question, and we will come back. He's going to go and
yeah.
answer the door. I will pause the recording now. So we're back.
Yeah.
Cory's been chatting to his neighbor, some Japan Inaka realness there.
That's right. That's right. You never know when people are going to show up.
So there's maybe one thing that's different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, geez, so much has changed. Like, starting with the boys, they went from this school where in each grade there were 3 or 4 classes in Tokyo to now like 1 class per grade, basically. So much smaller schools, much more kind of intimate environment for them. We got a dog, and I'm sure dogs will come up multiple times in this conversation because it's something we have in common, but that's been a big, really big family change for us. Work has certainly changed a lot. I mean, basically my work has changed twice since we moved out here. So that's been a really big change in terms of like being around family. And I asked my older son, Tayo, recently about what it's been like for me to make this change. And his answer was, I get to kind of see more of what you do and understand it more, which for me was like, wow, cool. Okay. It's great. So kind of more exposure to what my work is and being around it. One of the big motivators for me for moving out here was to have the boys experience community in a different way than Tokyo. We did have a nice group of friends there and a community in that way, but it's different than a rural community. And that's been it's exceeded expectations in so many ways. I mean, the community here is so generous. And, with COVID, it's been tricky because we can't necessarily be with people. In the countryside, it's certainly a bit looser and more relaxed than it is in Tokyo, but still in terms of knowing that there is community and having people show up as community and us wanting to show up in that way for other people in the community, that's been a really big change as well.
Oh, interesting. Where do you sort of see your role in that community? And I asked that very specific question because, one of the interpretations around Ikigai is about like, where is our role in society and who are we in relationship to other people? And I've talked many times on this podcast about a researcher in Tokyo, Hasegawa sensei, and he was doing research that showed and we'll get onto this topic a little bit later, but when Japanese men retired and they were living in their family home with their son. So if they were 3 generations with the son and the children, then their Ikigai went down. If they lived with their daughter and her family, their Ikigai kind of stayed the same. And it was to do with their role as the head of the family and their connection to that. And so when the role as the head of the family, when they were living with the son, they felt that was like less connected. But with their daughter, they somehow didn't find their son-in-law to be as much of an affront to their role as the father of the house. But so that I kind of want to get into this whole kind of men and Ikigai conversation with you in a moment. But in terms of like your role in community and how it's different, what's come up for you in the rural perspective?
Well, what's interesting is, there's community on kind of different layers here. And like there's just in the neighborhood, and it's like showing up to cut the weeds with the other people in the neighborhood, and like just how much that shows like, yes, I am an active part of this, and how much people appreciate it and how that comes back to you. So there's that level of just like, show up to the stuff that we do together, because that's what we do in this neighborhood, right? And then there's the bigger level of like kind of Minakami as a community and wanting to, the vision that I'm working with in my head right now is I want it to be a place that my children's children, kind of looking multiple generations out, both can and want to live, either live or come back to live. Because one of my first memories of having discussions about coming here was at my son's school, the elementary school. and the principle there talking about the J curve that happens here, which is people moving from Minakami into Tokyo and then coming back, but only coming as far back as Maebashi. Okay. So like Tokyo is a bit too much, a bit too intense, but we still want to be in a city where there's opportunity. So we come back as far as like Maebashi or Takasaki, which is still an hour from here, right? So rather than that, like I want it to be a place that is thriving enough and interesting enough for the kids to want to live in. So what can my actual role in that be? First of all, as a non-Japanese, right? And, you know, part of what I do here is support the town by being what's called a relocation concierge. Ooh. So they have this cool program when people want to move here, and particularly if they're English speakers, they'll meet with me and I can show them around town and tell them about the community and what it's been like for our family to move here. So there's that level of it. And then there's this other level of the kind of, how do we develop a stronger vision within the members of the community, not necessarily kind of at the Yakuba town office level, but really from people. And so one of the ideas a friend of mine and I are working on is like a summit for junior high school kids in Minakami so that they can talk about what they think the vision is. Because if we're thinking about multiple generations out, but we as the adults are making all the decisions, then how much is that even going to resonate with what younger people want? So getting younger people to talk about, well, if Minakami was this kind of place, then, you know, maybe people, our kids or whatever, would want to live here. So in some ways, I don't necessarily have a right to do any of this stuff as a non-Japanese person here, but that's also the way I can't not think about it in that way, because I love this place so much and I've moved my family here and I plan to live the rest of my days here. So what can I do to have some small impact on the community?
Why are my guests all so great and always bringing me to tears? Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. Like, and I just want to ask, this is like a kind of, I did a course last week and we talked about like unzipping, like, you know, coming out of where we are for the moment and kind of showing our real self. And as you were describing that what you were talking about, how much you loved Minakami and all of those things about the future, what was happening inside you?
Probably two things. One is like, man, I really want to do this. And the other, like, can I really do this? You know, is how much of this is just talk? Can I really follow through on this stuff? Or is it just aspirational, you know? But we talked, I think, a little bit about this before we started, but one of the big things, probably the biggest things I've noticed since I've moved to Minakami is this, a sense of coming home. And there's emotion for me coming up as I'm talking about that, because it is on an emotional level. Like the first few months that we lived here, I do a lot of running and cycling and stuff. And I would just stop somewhere and look at the surroundings and start to cry because there was this feeling of like, fuck, you know, I'm home. Like, and man, this is weird. Like I'm from the other side of the planet, but there's this feeling of like, I'm here, like I'm back where I'm supposed to be. And so it's been really powerful and sometimes confusing, but also like, that is definitely what's kind of driving the things that I'm doing right now is like, yes, I'm back home to where I want to be. And now I can come into kind of my full power of being able to do the things that I can do.
Oh my God. I love it. I absolutely love it. And for anyone, you know, listening, watching, that was just described then, that feeling of being home, the view is so beautiful, you burst into tears. That's Ikigai. It's not something you can put in a Venn diagram, but for me, like that's one of the moments of Ikigai when you feel your presence on the planet, you feel your connection as a human in this world. With and just a sense of like really being here and now. And Ken Moggy talks about that a lot in his book. And you know, in Japanese, なんだっけ、今ここ expression will kind of come out like here and now. Yeah, beautiful. So we have this very strong like in the moment sensation, and then what I was not very skillfully kind of trying to direct or to see, because when you talked about the junior high school students and that kind of program and what your hopes were, you know, your body language changed, your energy totally changed, you know, the emotional field really shifted again in that moment too. And it was something about, you know, there's that Ikigai feeling when we're dreaming up the future. And that, you know, we don't necessarily have all the pieces. We're not everybody that, you know, everything that we need to be right now in order to achieve that, but still there's something in that, like, imagine. And I love that you're like the generation after this generation, right? My children's children, like that's a great kind of long-term Ikigai vision. Yeah. I didn't ask a question, but just leaving that in the space. Yeah. What's come up for you from what I mentioned then?
Just one of the things I feel I might want to point to is like a lot of my work as a coach is willing to be in silence, and it doesn't lend itself very well to podcasting. so I'm kind of aware of that, as that's my kind of natural way to just kind of be with you and be together in that, and also wanting to kind of talk into it and how to express that, like, all of this has been of a piece for me personally, kind of looking at where we're at on the planet, like you mentioned, the relationship to that, and kind of this growing awareness for me of the time of civilizational transformation that we're in right now. And like being such a like yes to that, like whatever it takes to do my part in that, and not sure what it is, but why I love my work so much, and getting to work with people in personal transformation, and more kind of with groups as well in their transformation. And just like, it feels like so the time we're in, and so what's called for, and can feel overwhelming and scary as well. But all of that is just really alive for me today, and kind of as we have this conversation.
Well, thank you. Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and like the spring as well, you know, just that's what I love about living here, is just like you see this stuff, the lightness of its green that's coming out, whereas like a week ago there was nothing on these trees, you know, and it's just like you get to see it in front of you every day. And so how can you not be aware of it, and also know that you're part of it?
I want to thank you for naming two things. One, the artificial nature of a podcast conversation, where we can't just like sit in beautiful silence with each other as we take in the view and let the moment be. Although maybe we could. Maybe this is a new way to run a podcast. So think about that for the future, to be challenge listeners and challenge myself and my guests to just sit, to just be with it. That's another way of experiencing Ikigai. So note to self there. But there's an edge on it, isn't it? Like, do I want to just sit listening to dead space? Am I going to be like checking, is my phone okay? Is the connection gone? Is it stopped? So that's an interesting reaction. And I wanted to delve a little bit more, or something you said was really fascinating about like that. It's a bit terrifying, like feeling, this is my word and not a word that you said, but I kind of felt like some sort of weight or burden of our role. And I'm thinking about, you know, coaching sessions that I've done when we have used the like Western Venn diagram of Ikigai. What do you love? What are you good at? What can you pay for? And what does the world need? And that, like, what does the world need question can really bring up those feelings. So can you just talk a little bit about like how you sit with that, or how you process that feeling of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It's too big. Or maybe please describe more how that feeling shows up for you as well, your personal experience of it, and how you deal with it.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind is just my own part of my personal story of what has me where I am in my work right now. And that was I was at Tokyo American Club for a year commuting, and then I got this opportunity to run an outdoor and adventure company here. And it was, in theory, like this ideal job, my first level C-level position, running a complex organization, having to do with the outdoors, all that. And it fell apart in ways that were kind of traumatic.
Right.
And there was the breakdown in that was required for the breakthrough to be where I am now and get to have the life that I have and get to live the way that I'm living. And so, like, I know on a very deep level, like, what is involved in transformation, and there is some kind of a breakdown. And so that's part of, like, knowing where we're at right now is like seeing, everyone can see it around us, and what has to happen to move into whatever's next. And the what can I do part of it, like a kind of a sense of urgency to know what my role is and to know how to do it well and how to do it effectively. And also that there's a lot of it is there's an allowing and there's a trust that has to happen for that. And so kind of balancing all of that. I don't know, does all that track in?
No, it's really resonating with me. What you said about the breakdown to breakthrough. That's a great little quote. I'm sure it'll be on an audiogram on this one, but something about transformation and maybe the changes that you want to make in order to integrate your Ikigai to live more with like that iki, excited, all those different feelings in your heart. Yeah, you might have to like break some stuff. And there's lots of challenges that come with that, internally and external factors around it. So I think it's good to just remind people that making that type of life transformation, it might be smooth for you, and more power to your elbow if it is. That's brilliant. Just to kind of slow and steady, shifts daily in the moment, kind of gradually getting to where you feel is where you want to be right now. But for some other people, and many of my guests on this podcast, there's been quite a lot of barriers in the way, moving from like what you should be doing to what you actually want to do. So around that resonated a lot with me. And I think it's really something which doesn't get talked about a lot around the topic of Ikigai. And I'm really passionate to kind of bring to the surface that in some cases, people are going to be like, Cory, why are you doing this? Or like what a difficult situation you might have to go through. I'm thinking of Matthew Dons, who was a guest previously as well. He talked about his cancer diagnosis and how that really shifted how he thought about what was important and what was his purpose here. And of course, I'm not like wishing difficult situations on anybody in the world, but when those big changes can also be catalysts too, right? Why am I so stressed out about this? It's because it's not in alignment with how I want to be every day as well. Can be coming up too. So babbling, but I'm very aware that I have many times foreshadowed that we're going to talk about men and Ikigai, and we haven't talked about it yet. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. So if I've missed some gems, I apologize, but I've said about 4 times, we're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about that later. It's later now. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, so first of all, at the end of coming towards the end of season 1 of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai, I was like, looking at the diversity of my guests, I was like, hang on, there's no Japanese men. And I looked around my network and I went, Japanese men, who I feel live in their Ikigai. Kind of hard. Okay. So I asked all my guests to recommend people, and I got some great names, and some people have been on, some people are still like kind of in discussion. But it was really interesting that many people said, oh, I can't think of anyone. And I know that you're doing work with groups of Japanese and non-Japanese men here living in Japan. And I wondered, from obviously within your confidentiality clauses, but the sort of trends which are coming up about the idea of Ikigai, purpose, why am I here? What are you noticing? And especially because this is maybe another level which we don't have to talk about right now. You know, last time I saw you a couple of weeks ago was at the TEL summit on mental health, and just seeing how many men are suffering with mental health issues in the world, suicide being the biggest killer of young men, and just thinking about, you know, Ikigai for me as well is a very personal decision every day to still be in the world. I choose to be here because I know that I have another option every single day. I can choose it. I can choose to do something and end my life. That's my ability that I have, a privilege that I have. So I'm so obsessed with Ikigai because I want to know there is a reason for me to be here and I'm choosing to be here. So there's maybe too many levels there, but perhaps first of all, like, tell us a little bit about the spaces you're creating and the type of conversations that are happening with the men that you're working with anyway.
I find there's kind of two angles that I'd like to answer that from. One is in my individual coaching work and what it's like for Japanese men to start to work with a coach for the first time. And pretty much all of my clients have not had experience working with a coach before. And so it's the amount of time to actually get them to say, like, well, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do here, right? It is, what is the agenda that you'll bring? What is it that you want to create? And so, like, something as simple as giving the man an exercise of writing down, I want blank, like 10 times with 10 different responses, and like how much that moves these people, like, wow, I hadn't thought about that, you know, and like, what is it that I even want as a starting place? And then like continuing to have them set the agenda every time we talk was like, well, what is it? Like, you've said what you've wanted, you've put it into kind of a project framework, and now what do you need every time? All of that it's just quite an unfamiliar space for Japanese men and women, but men to be in, because it's so hierarchical, right? And there's such a culture of being told what they will do, right?
What you also want, like, as an individual isn't that important. So you can go to a good school, go to university,
right,
get into the right company, and that's it. What you want, what?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's that. That's kind of something that's been a really interesting part of the journey. And then the research that I've done through for my men's group is I've been, and what will eventually become a podcast, are these interviews about men being supported in Japan. And for Japanese men, like, what does it even mean to ask for support? And I think that's quite an unfamiliar thing for a lot of Japanese men, is like, to ask for support is kind of a level of vulnerability, and what would throw cracks into that whole thing is like, what I'm not supposed to need support because I'm supposed to know where I'm going next, you know, and I'm supposed to be on this particular track. So the people, I guess in some ways it's not surprising that a lot of the Japanese men that I'm close to are kind of counterculture in Japan. And so I do have men that I talk to that are kind of doing that and can feel quite isolated. So it ends up being a lot of men that have lived overseas and have come back, but that may struggle to integrate. It tends to be men that live some of the men that I know live more in rural areas, and that's a little bit easier because you can kind of do your own thing in rural areas. But I think it can be quite isolating to do this type of counterculture stuff that doesn't fit in. And so it's not necessarily like having your own Ikigai is not necessarily something that is kind of supported and encouraged. And so I think men need to know more men that are doing that. Japanese men in particular need to be in communities of men that are doing that and have it be supported.
Right. So that feeling of, if someone else is doing it, it kind of gives me permission to also take this step and to sort of step outside the norm. I really love what you've said about that question. What do you want? I think it's like there's a couple of like really powerful coaching questions, which are really always hard to answer, and we come at them. But yeah, that what do you want is one of them. My other one is, why are you here? Now, why are you really here? Why are you here? Why are you here? But yeah, what do you want? And it is very hard for many people in that first time to like truly answer. Yeah. So what do you, when you're working with your clients and maybe in the group, what do you notice about how those answers change over time?
Well, as I mentioned before we started, I've got recency bias because I'm kind of thinking about things that have happened even in conversations today. But
hot off the press, no problem.
one of the Japanese leaders that I'm working with right now is, the way that he started to answer those questions was quite personal, and then he's brought it more into the team setting and kind of talking more about like how he even understands his role as a leader within a team is changing, and so how much of it is around him and what he's supposed to be doing for the team and almost kind of like at the team, and realizing, well, wait a minute, like we can, empowering a team is actually a shared responsibility. I don't have to do it to them, right? I don't have to do it to them as empowerment. It's like, what can we do together? And so I'm seeing like, as he is allowing himself to kind of reconsider what he does, he's bringing that into his team as well. And in the conversation we had today, literally the expression of like seeing smoke coming out of his ears, because that's kind of the thing that's going on in him, is like, right, like these things that I want to do, but also in consideration of my team, it's all of us together. Right. So,
and maybe it's also that you realize like all the challenges that it was for like me to say, how difficult it was for me to say, what do I want?
Yeah.
My team are also going through that as well. And their inner life and inner world is as complicated and as complex as mine.
Yeah.
So, why am I expecting them in their one-on-one with me to be open, to be transparent about what they really want out of their career? Because sometimes when we talk about what we really want, it's a little bit scandalous, and we're afraid of judgment or rejection, so we just kind of keep it. Well, I do anyway. I'm very careful with my use of we there. I certainly keep some of those things of what I want, suppress them for easy life and social acceptance. So less so now, but still a work in progress on it. But I think once you are able to answer those questions honestly to yourself, it's first step.
Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of our time. So I just want to circle back and see, is there any topics you wanted to delve back into, or something that I said we were going to talk about and we haven't?
Yeah, well, I mentioned dogs, and I think there should always be space in every conversation for dogs. I'm celebrating that you've put out your recent book about Gus, and that's a beautiful thing. And
links below.
Yeah. And I've actually realized, like, so we unfortunately had a tragic loss of our dog a couple months ago. And now have a new puppy in our life, which is great. And I've kind of been going through my own training with my dog, meaning that my dog is training me. So I take him into the mountains because I really want him to be a mountain dog. And every time I realize, like, he's getting me to kind of slow down, because my thing is like charge up to the top of a mountain as fast as you can. And so just pointing to the genius of dogs and the way that they can be with, you know, I don't think they'd call it Ikigai, but just like their way of living and how in touch with like everything they are in a way that I think sets really great examples for us. So that's just something that's really alive for me right now. And it seems more and more people are realizing the importance of that as we've been in isolation so much, and, you know, kind of pet ownership has really increased, and people are seeing that more. So yeah, it's just something that's alive for me right now, and curious what that's like. You're a multiple dog owner as well, aren't you?
No.
No. Okay.
This is, no.
I've seen you post
actually
pictures of dogs, but
my first hit story from my childhood is called Jenny and the Puppy. And this was only published once on a piece of paper that was left on the dining room table. It was about a little girl called Jenny, who was, I think, 6.5. I can't remember the age. My parents still have this piece of paper. And her sister, who is not in this story. And anyway, Jenny always wanted a puppy. I can tell you the whole thing. Jenny wanted a puppy. Her birthday came, no puppy. Christmas came, still no puppy. One day, Jenny went out into the fields near her house. There was a sound in the grass. Suddenly, not suddenly, but suddenly, a puppy appeared. She took it home and was allowed to keep it. The end. I left this story on the table, age, I don't know, 5, 6, 7. My parents can correct me on this. 44, still no puppy.
Your parents didn't get the hint.
Still no puppy. But you know, David came to me with this poem after I published Can Giraffe Swim last year, and I was just such an astounding character. And then my friend John, who I have only met online, that sounds really dodgy, but we met in the Search Inside Yourself leadership program, you know, the mindfulness program, and he was my mindfulness buddy. He also got a puppy, and he would send me pictures of Charlie. And Charlie was my model. So it's quite the international, but I've still not had a puppy, and I don't think I will have a puppy. Maybe in the future. Yeah, we don't have pets. I'm such a city girl now. And I used to like the freedom to travel without having, you know, to think about who's going to look after the hamster. So yeah, there's something in that. Is Puppy around?
He just came home. And he's chewing on some chewy thing right now.
Yeah, I thought I could like a little.
Want me to bring him out for a quick introduction? Hold on one second.
An extra special guest, everyone. It's very exciting. Our first canine, I believe. Yes. Here we go. I'm enjoying the beautiful view in the background. I haven't paused this, so you can just listen to me. Here we come. Back again.
Can we see him?
Oh my goodness, there's a little ear.
Whoops.
Oh, how cute. Wow, what a view.
He doesn't love being
watch the rating of this video now.
This is Kylie.
Hello,
hey,
Kylie.
Hey. Good boy. Okay, there you go.
So cute. Sorry, listeners. Wait for the YouTube to come out to meet Kylie. The first dog to be included on Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai. That was very nice. I like that, being in the moment there. Bring in our dogs. Don't have one, but there you go.
Nice.
Just have Gus in my background here. So where can people get in touch with you, Cory? How can they connect?
Yep. So Cory at adventurepartner.net. So it's adventure-partner.net is my website. I'm on LinkedIn somewhat, on Instagram somewhat. But since you have brought up men, I would love any men that are interested in being in community with other men. I'll be launching a program called Keyaki. Keyaki is a kind of tree like that one right there.
Okay.
That will be starting probably in May or June. And it's a place to be in community with other men and kind of talking about rooting, growing, and expanding in lots of different ways, talking about relationship, work, well-being, all that type of thing, kind of challenging each other into being accountable and communication, and just a lot of stuff that is it's for men in Japan only, and it can be quite difficult for men to kind of access that type of group and support within Japan. So I want to provide that, and I'm really excited about getting started. So anyone that's interested can reach out to me.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. And do you have a final message for the listeners of Ikigai with Jennifer Shinkai they can take on their way?
My message is come to Minakami. I love sharing this place with people. So if you'd like to check it out, please let me know, and I'd love to show you around and share the beauty and wildness and adventure of this place.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, bringing in the Inaka realness with the dog and the neighbor and the beautiful views for those of you who are watching on YouTube. For the rest of us, just imagine amazing greens. And also actually do check out, the links will be in the show notes, but do check out Cory's website, because he's got, in his role as the relocation concierge, there's lots of amazing images and videos that you can check out as well. So even if you're a city person like me, you can dream and make it happen. So thank you so much, Cory. I look forward to seeing you in person next time you're in Tokyo, or maybe I'll head up to Minakami sometime.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Bye-bye.